in partnership with our friends at your local public library and Donovan from Studio Moonfall, thank you guys all so much for coming to our 3rd annual Southport Lit Fair, which Skylar confirmed for me is our biggest one yet, so yay. Thank you guys for being here, and I want to give an extra shout out. Who's here from Carthage Book Club? You guys have been such awesome partners to work with. Thank you guys all so much for coming. So yeah, thank you guys so much. We're here for the fantasy panel. We're going to talk about world building and everything that goes into these, magical systems, even for books where it's more magical realism, but there's still something paranormal, all the way over to books that are just straight magical universes. So we're going to talk about some fun stuff today. We'll have some time for questions for the audience at the end. And then after this panel, I'll announce the winner for the author scavenger hunt, so keep an ear out for that. And then it'll be pretty much wrapped up by then. So after this panel, make sure you get any book signed that you want to, because it's been a very long day for our amazing authors. But we really appreciate you guys all being here. And then just another quick shout out that we do author events and fun things all the time. So make sure you're keeping an eye on our website and seeing what we're up to. So without further ado, Meadow, I'll let you take it away.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's really holding the microphone. See, I don't use a microphone very often. Is this better? Oh, okay. All right, so I'll just start by introducing everybody, and then we'll get into it. So Skyla Arndt is the author of 2 young adult books, Together We Rot, and her new book, House Apart, which I think you have right there. Her stories are celebrated for their stunning psychological depth and the way she builds worlds that are both fantastical and intensely personal.
Thank you.
And then we have Z Laxon. Z is a photographer, artist, and storyteller. She's the author of the Wool Gathering trilogy, which was a finalist for the 2021 soon-to-be-famous Illinois Author Project. Her Twice Removed book was published on Philippine Independence Day in 2024 and won a BIBA, the Best Indie Book Award that year. And then Haley Galfuso is an author and poet. Her debut novel, The Book of Lost Hours, is a Good Morning America book of the month club, which is super cool. And it was called A Magnificent and Complex Feat of Imagination, a love story that defines the boundaries of time, memory, and reality. Ooh. So these ladies know about world building, so we're going to talk about it. All right, so when you guys start working on a project and you start thinking about the story and the world, where do you start? Do you start with the world, with the characters, and how do those things then work together as you're coming?
I'll go ahead and try the mic. I start with Pinterest. Yeah, I don't know if that's like typical, but I'm very visual based, so I need to know what the atmosphere of the book is going to be like, and Pinterest is just my favorite site. I'm not sponsored. I would like to be. But no, I just try to curate an aesthetic, and I think a lot of times that will feed into what the setting looks like, and sometimes it's even for different emotions, you'll see character skills, and I'll see maybe there's a lot of anger or grief in the book, but I just collect, and it's just based on the vibes. So, so Pinterest. What a good start.
I write magical realism, so a lot of the things I write are based on real life. And what I want to do first is make sure that my character has a certain kind of growth, and from them is when I come up with plot, and from the plot we figure out what magical part of it will make the story work.
So I have only published 1 book, but I have written quite a few. I would say, and one trend that I've noticed is that for me, there's always a concept that kind of kicks something off, but then it always has to connect back to characters. So at any given time, I can circulate 3 or 4 different concepts, but until I find the characters and who they are, nothing really happens. And I would say, in general, the characters inform the world, more than the rules of the world itself do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Back.
So Pinterest is not super common.
Sorry.
That's a really good
They should
idea.
sponsor me then. I don't know.
Can they follow you on Pinterest and see your...
Technically they could, but I do have to keep it private, because I have all these random ideas, and I'm I don't know if this makes sense, so I just keep it private. But so in theory, you could.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's talk about how you build to your universes. How do you keep track of your notes? How do you decide on the rules? All of that good stuff.
Pinterest.
I'm not going to say Pinterest. I know. Yeah, so for mine, so it's not full second world, but I do a lot of research, arguably too much research. I like to use, for me, I use Scrivener, so I'll have one side, which is like a, if you don't know what it is, it's a Word software app. Yeah. So you can do two screens at once. So I'll have one that's a document, and then one is like my 50-page of rambling notes, and then I will go back and forth. But for me, at least for world building, I really focus on research of like what does the setting look like, what does the architecture look like. So it's just a lot of notes on that, and I wouldn't say I kept it in order that well. I just had a huge Google Doc, but yeah, I put it side by side on Scrivener so I could reference it.
Nothing is in order.
No.
Nothing.
No.
Nothing. So when I start out, I have the main concept that there is, and then like you, I can be very visual. So then I'll draw like webs. It comes out from that, and it spirals out. And then that's when you put the little things of, okay, what's the world like? What's this like? What's that like? And then later on, as the story's coming, then you have to like come up with the details of those things. But the main ones are like big bubbles, and then the little ones come off to the side. And I've had to start with like notebooks and then cross them out and then start with newer notebooks. So who here collects notebooks? See, you are my people, right? So finally, when this started happening, what I decided was to get those with like removable pages, so I don't keep ripping stuff off or rewriting things, and that's how I do it.
Okay, my answer is going to be a little bit obnoxious because I keep track of it in my head and I make it up as I go along. And so like the rules, so to speak, the one thing that I did specifically for the Book of Lost Hours was I was trying to ground it in like actual scientific theories, very like loosely defined scientific theories, obviously, because it is not scientific. And so there are a couple of like real world tethers to tie me back to things. But I literally do, like I keep it in my head, because especially when I'm writing something at speed, like it's usually a fast process, so it's not that hard for me to keep it in my head. And then I literally do make it up as I go along, which probably is obnoxious, but then it's better when you realize that then that means sometimes I have to like go back and throw out 100 pages and start over because I picked a different rule for the world. So, that's how I roll.
I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
Okay, so if you make it up in your head, did you ever have one where you're like reading it and you realize there's no, you're not consistent with one chapter to the other?
No, but my editor did. There is something that to this day is a little bit sketchy about like one of the first couple of chapters of my book where a character does something that then I had to go back and include an explanation for like 200 pages later, because she's like, wait, she did this thing, but that never comes up again and it never happens except for in this one moment. And so it was very like I had to like retroactively add something in because it was important to that scene. And so yes, my editor has caught it.
That's why we have editors.
I got it.
All right, so I like to think of world building kind of like an iceberg where there's so much underneath the water, you just see this little, tip of it. Do you guys have any favorite bits of world building or, stuff that maybe didn't make it into your books, or just a favorite bit of delicious little world building that maybe people would catch?
This is my turn to sound obnoxious. Nothing like that was cut. I think because it wasn't a super in-depth like second world fantasy that I had all this like extra lore to work with.
Yeah.
The only thing coming to my scene, and this is not important at all, it was like a like certain type of waffle. I went because it's like they're at a boarding school and it's like based off of all of these fancy like private schools and stuff like that. And there's like I think it's like Harvard or somewhere they have like special like crusted waffles. Yeah, so I got that, and then I was like, no, that's a little bit too niche, and then I got rid of it. But yeah, aside from that, that's about it.
Great. In my Wool Gathering trilogy, it's the story of a dreamer, right? It's somebody that falls in love with somebody she only sees in her dream. So the world building I had to do there were the rules for this whole dreaming that she has to do. And my husband and I were the ones that we kind of map it out. So he's my sounding board. I say, does this make any sense? And he'd be like, oh, that's been done before or whatever. And then I'll tell him something, and then he goes, well, is somebody just appearing or disappearing, things like that. And then I go, well, okay, since it's all about sleep and dream, you know, sometimes you can't stop yourself from yawning. So our whole thing was when you yawn, something appears or disappears, but you don't know because you're forced to close your eyes when you yawn. Never shows up in the book. But it's what happens.
So I've got a couple. One of mine is just sort of the history of the interdimensional library that my main character gets trapped in. Is very rooted in like monastic history. So I have this one character, his name is Asriel, and he is sort of like the surrogate father figure for the main character. And his entire backstory never shows up in the book for good reason, and that's because most of his memories of his own life have been erased, and that's a big part of why he exists, is because they took away all of his memories. But his backstory is one of my favorite little things, because his whole thing is that he was a monk who lived in the Carthaginian Empire back when the Romans were doing all of their like pillaging and crusading and things like that. And so his entire story is predicated on the fact that he was a member of this giant empire way, way back in like the 300s AD or even further than that. And his entire culture, including his own memories, were erased. And it's just sort of like, especially when I was giving notes to the narrator for the audiobook, she asked me about his character, and it was the first time I ever got to talk about it, because no one had asked. She's like, what kind of accent should he have? And I was like, well, here's the thing. He's technically from this region, but blah, blah, blah. It was like a whole thing. So that's definitely one of my favorite pieces. It's just his story. And no one's ever going to know that, because it's on the book. So there you go.
They know that now.
They know it now.
Know that now.
You should write a story.
Yeah, it sounds like a
Prequel.
Prequel.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you guys make your world feel lived in so that it feels real, you know, when we're reading it?
Yeah, to try to keep it from feeling like a liminal like backroom space.
Yeah.
I think of like the senses. Like I'm very much atmosphere is my favorite part of writing. So it's after I write the first draft, which very much is a liminal backroom space, I will go back in. I'll flesh it out of like what kind of background characters are walking around. What I have like 50 pages of notes on architecture, like collegiate architecture.
Okay.
No one forced me to do that. I had fun doing it. So just to describe what the boarding school looks like. So I wanted to do my justice there, and then just like different like senses that could be played with. Like what is she hearing? What is she seeing? Just different ways to make the scene actually feel like they're not just in a white box.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I had fun with atmosphere, so, and I guess taking notes on architecture.
Mine is magical realism, so a lot of it is actually realistic already. So when we're talking about world building on the part that isn't realistic, my main character is also being introduced to it for the first time. So my main character is asking the same questions that readers would ask. So when you're reading through it, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense, my main character will be like, that doesn't make any sense. And then she'd have to do the research, or the research has to come to her. So with building that, it's like little by little, there's discovery through the characters.
So I think, especially in this book, I didn't want the world to feel lived in, if that makes sense, because the book is set in primarily like an interdimensional library where all of the dead, or the memories of the dead, are stored inside of books. And so it's this place that is supposed to be kind of out of reach, and so I wanted it to feel very removed from the world. And in the book, you know, it says that only maybe 100 people over the course of history have even seen it. And so one thing I did do, that's probably a better answer than no one, is I made sure that there were kind of little, you know, signs of the way the course of history has changed. So one of the elements of the library itself is that there are people who enter it to either save memories inside of books or burn memories to change the course of history, to rewrite it. And so I was trying to leave clues of like who at what given time was walking in the halls of this place, whether it was the Romans in the very beginning or the Catholic Church when they were at the height of their power, all the way to like the Nazis during World War II. During the Cold War, it was Russia and the US. And so just like leaving little breadcrumbs of historical context of like, this was the group that was in power, this was the group that was manipulating history at this time the most vividly. And so that's, the most answer I can give to the lived in part, because the point is that it was not lived in, so to speak, so, yeah.
I wonder what happened in 2020.
All right, so this one is for Skyla. So your stories have a strong sense of mood and atmosphere.
Interest.
Do you approach building a world's emotional landscape differently than you would like the physical, real world?
God, this is going to go back to Pinterest.
It always comes back.
It does. Well, like I said, when I am planning it, I'm kind of planning everything at the same time, and I'm trying to get a sense of. Well, I think it also goes to what is the character's arc. Are they grieving? Or like in her case, she is, or are they angry? And looking through all of these pins, I was just like looking for different stills from different movies of like grieving characters, ones that like have female rage, and that's really how I get inspiration for it. Is like just by building a sense of what I think the character's main struggle is. But I would say that, yeah, it all kind of comes together with the main research and, yeah.
Oh, this is just for you.
Oh, that's right. What do you have to say?
Okay, so see, your Wool Gathering trilogy features worlds built on the logic of dreams. Like, I think that dreams are really difficult to write because they're so fluid. So what were the challenges of building a universe there where the rules kind of are fluid or non-traditional, as opposed to our real life? Was it like freedom?
Or a bit more difficult, or
yeah.
whatever. I was really worried because I was worried that these are things that only I have experienced or would have thought of. But the cool thing is, in writing this story, when I talk to other people from different parts of life, they would be like, oh, I've experienced something like that. I've had a recurring dream also. I've dreamt also about a guy, or from the guy's point of view, I've dreamt about this girl, right? So they can relate to it, and I go, okay, I can build on that, right? Now, there are different ideas of dreams. There's, are you in an astral plane? Is it going to another universe? And what I did with that was I played with a little bit of it. Like, you don't know as a character which of these realities is the reality of the book. So when you're reading it, you're also confused, all right? And that was actually kind of fun, because then I got to play in all the different universes that I wanted to write in before I settled on the one that we made up.
Cool. All right, so Haley, your book goes through lots of different time periods. You've got World War II, the Cold War era. So what drew you to those eras? Were there challenges there? And then you also have, the time space, which is obviously not a real place. So how did you, make that time space feel as real as the others? How did you approach that?
Those are good questions. So the thing that drew me to that particular time in history is a little bit dark, I guess. Because when I was in college, I was like an international studies major, and so I took a lot of classes on history and things like that. And when you talk about the end of World War II and like the start of the Cold War, those two events in history are sort of like the bookmarks of the modern age, if that makes sense. Like after those things happened or during those moments in history, so much about the world was being defined, and especially, the Cold War. That was a time when like there was literally like this war of like, what is the world going to look like? And so much of that war happened in places that, we here in the US or in Russia itself, they didn't see those wars. And it only came out years later, like, oh, we interfered over here in Nicaragua, or oh, we were doing stuff all over Africa that no one in the US actually really knew about or talked about. And one of the really big important themes of the Book of Lost Hours is just the idea of all of this quiet history that happens in the background, and the people who are writing history that we don't even know what's happening or what they're doing. And there are people out there who make decisions and make calls and start like proxy wars. And so when I was thinking about, or I was drawn to that era in particular because of that notion, because it's the most literal definition that I could find, historically speaking, of, you know, governments warring in secret in like a very massive scale. But then thinking about like roping in the time space to that, that is what that place ultimately became. It was supposed to be like this sacred library of memories of the dead that people could go and visit and see the past. And it was something that ultimately became just another proxy war throughout the course of history, where people were entering, they were changing things, they were, you know, molding the past to fit a specific narrative. And so making it feel real was just sort of a reflection of the world, unfortunately today, but also during that time period where, you know, it was the Americans and the Russians. There's a big, you know, battle going on in the book between the American timekeepers and the Russian timekeepers, and just keeping it grounded in what was going on in the outside world helped me kind of bring it all together from like a historical perspective.
That was such an eloquent answer. That was a really great answer.
Credit to my one public speaking class.
Very nice. I should have enrolled.
So to me, like world building and research are kind of those things you can kind of fall into a rabbit hole. Just, you can endlessly research, you can endlessly world build, and you don't get to your story. At least I don't, maybe. How do you guys know when your world is complete enough to start the story? Do you research like as you're going on? Like how does that work?
I mainly just dive in. For me though, most of my stuff doesn't come through just the first draft. Nobody gets to see that, it's garbage. But it comes through revision. I always think of it as like chipping at like to make like a marble statue. It's gonna look awful in the beginning, but you're gonna get to it eventually. So I don't worry so much in the beginning about it being perfect, because then I'll never write. I'll never write. So I focus on just getting words down. So I actually have this like free write, which is, if you don't know what it is, it's like a typewriter with the internet. So I'm like I can't look at the screen or I'm going to be. So I just get it all down, and then I go through and then I layer in the research as I go along. And yeah, I just work in revision stages, and it's a little bit less daunting than having to have everything perfect for the first draft.
Oh yeah, for sure. You start with the story, and you write your story, and somewhere in the middle you're going to be like, oh yeah, I don't know the answer to that one. Let me research more
Circle
on
back.
that. Yeah, like, you know, and then you have a small world. You start with a small world. You start with a world that you're seeing, that you're writing on. That's your world right now. And then as you continue writing more scenes, your world gets bigger. And then when you go on your second revision, or when your editor says it doesn't make any sense, then you're like, okay, I have to put more detail into this world and clean it up a little bit. So yeah, the drafts get better and more built as we get along.
Yeah, very similar with revisions, and kind of like what you said, at some point you do have to stop researching. Because if you keep going, you'll never get there. So like one of the things, this book in particular was historical, so one of the things that I did to help myself was I read a lot of other books written in the time period so that I could get a sense of it. And then I also read nonfiction, of course. But one thing I really like doing, if you're at all interested in historical fiction, is there's a lot of like diaries of people who lived in certain eras of history, and so I will read a diary of someone who was alive during that time period, just to kind of get an idea of like what someone who was actually there thought and saw, and that helps me a lot. But a lot of it, like I said, it does come with the revisions, especially for like the magical world building. The historical, you kind of have to get it right as you go. So like, you know, today I'm writing an office scene where they're working in an office in the 1960s or 50s. What would that character be wearing? What would, like, I remember distinctly going down a rabbit hole about like what sort of, I needed her to like be taught, my main character, to be taught how to use a machine. And I was like trying really hard to pick a machine that would both be difficult enough that she would need to be like taught how, but also like existed during the time period, you know? This was a whole thing. So it was like a 1950s office contraption, and I spent way too much time on it. But a lot of it was, you know, as the scenes come up and as the need is brought up, then I do the research, especially on little things like that. The most of like the bigger vibes come from reading and like pre-work, if that makes sense.
for sure, the little research that comes for like one sentence, right? Like a description of one thing, the amount of research you put into that, which technically is still writing.
And then your editor takes it out anyway. It's all good.
No, I literally am working on something that's like Victorian right now, and I was like, well, I should know what the plumbing is like. Like, all the chance, like, that they go to the So I spent all day, I was just like reading about Victorian plumbing. Yeah, and my husband was looking at me, he's like, are you having fun right now? I was like, yeah, actually, I am. If you want to know, it wasn't great.
Yeah, I spent so much time trying to figure out how people would get out of a boat, like in ancient Greece that wasn't like, because they didn't have like,
I
but I
get out of
spent
the
so
boat today.
much time, like, how did they get in and out of the boat if it's parked in the water? Like, I spent way too long on that.
It's still writing.
Yeah, it counts, I guess.
Pinterest is writing too.
Pinterest is
It
writing.
is, for sure. All right, so let's talk about characters. When you're building your characters and their abilities, like, how do you guys start? Are they inspired by someone? How do you decide if they're going to have special abilities and what that's going to be?
Go. So for mine, like, I wouldn't say these are based off of anyone in particular. I do feel like you end up putting parts of yourself, whether you like it or not. It just kind of ends up in your book. I would say for Violet, at least, I wasn't planning on basing her off of me, but her big thing is grief. And wouldn't you know it, in the middle of revision, I started, like, I lost someone too. So I was injecting a lot of my own personal feelings into the book. So sometimes it works like that. Sometimes you're inspired by media you've read. Like, this is heavily based off of Alice in Wonderland. And the character Violet, her middle name is actually Alice, because it's really funny. But I based her a little bit off Alice and just like her curiosity and her innate, like, wanting to go down these rabbit holes. But yeah, sometimes it's media, sometimes it's your own self going into the book, whether it's subconsciously or you're like, I'm gonna write about my grief today. Like, I mean, it really depends.
Sometimes it just happens, it just shows up there, and you're like, oh.
Like, I wrote about, I think I put like Celsius, I was drinking a lot of Celsius while I was writing it, like Monster, and then it just ended up in the book, and my editor was like, is this personal? And I was like, yeah.
When I first started writing, I was writing for fun. So there was a lot of me and my friends in it. And, like situations that I thought would be funny for my friends to get stuck into and stuff. A lot of it ended up making it into the final thing. But it started out a little bit personal.
Like director's cut.
Director's cut is a little bad. But it's funny because you put in sometimes people that you base it on. It doesn't end up that way in the end. But in the beginning, you're like, I was going to base this on somebody, but that's not really how that happened. And this book is in the point of view of a teen boy, so no. That's when you do a lot of research and things like that. But you pick it up from like friends and media and relatives. Like, you try to draw on other people's experiences, and then that's how one character gets made by multiple people.
My mom was always like, is this book about me? I'm like,
well.
Yeah, so I can't think of any like actual people that I intentionally molded characters after. There is one character in the book who is named after someone from my life, which is the main like romantic male interest. His name is Ernest. That was my grandfather's name. The two characters have basically nothing in common. My grandfather was from very rural Tennessee, was not, I don't think he ever had an education beyond like elementary school. Like, he was very, not like the Ernest in the book where he grew up like very affluent and everything like that. So the inspiration or like the reverence for the character was there in terms of like I named him after my grandfather, but I did not base him off of him. The only other, I would say, in a lot of ways, the character of Ernest is more reflective of my husband. Especially because he has an obsession with like watchmaking and like old watches and things like that. And there's a line in the book that I took because I knew that like I could imagine it being something that my husband said, where it's like a stopwatch is an unfortunate thing or something like that. So little pieces of him definitely made it into this book. But in terms of like overtly, intentionally bringing other people from my life into it, I try to avoid that because then I know that that person is going to read the book. And I have a very excitable mother-in-law who I once told her, like, I wrote one of the scenes when we were on our family vacation, so she would comb through and be like, okay, where is this reference? Am I in here? Like, what, every little thing. So I try not to do it on purpose. I'm sure there's like inspirations from media and things that unintentionally get in there. But overall, like, I can't do it because I know that person's going to read it. And like, if they don't like what the character looks like, then what does that say, you know?
When you mention that, like, there's only one character that's predominantly totally based over somebody, right? And it's the dad. It wasn't the main character, that's why I wasn't thinking of it, right? But the dad of my main character is 100% my father, right? Like the things that he is just like that. And a friend of mine had said, when she read it, she goes, oh, like, it's a really great story and everything. And she goes, but the one thing that really stands out is your love for your fathers. And I cried.
Yeah, I don't even think it matters what mom, like what book it is. Anytime there's a mom, my mom is going to be like, is this about me?
Of course it is, Mom.
Depends.
Yeah. If it's good, it's about you.
Exactly. All right, so Skyla, your characters often have like complex, fragmented identities, which I love. How does that show up in your world building? You know, and how did your world shape the inner lives of your characters?
Yeah, so with Violet, she has this kind of dual sense of, she's very inwardly, secretly emotional, but she likes to pretend that she's, I don't know, a robot or something, and that she's above feeling emotion. And that really stems from her childhood with both her deceased friend, Emery, who she was always like protecting, and then also her mom, who my mom's like, is this about me? Who was a little bit like kind of flighty and really used her daughter as a therapist. And so she always felt like she had to be the one that had her stuff together. But it's gotten to the point though where now she's like, it's so much that she doesn't feel like she can have emotion or cry. And it's breaking that down through the book and realizing that it's okay to be a human being and not a robot.
Cool. All right, so see, your novel, Twice Removed, is built on Filipino folklore. How did that affect your world building and what were the challenges there?
So unlike the trilogy where you can just make things up, this one is based on Filipino folklore, and I really wanted to give that a lot of respect and reverence, and I wanted to make sure I got certain things right. So there was a lot more research that went into that than I surprised myself. Like, I thought I knew about this because I grew up with this, and I realized, oh, there's way more into this than I thought there was. And I wanted to put that out there also. There were certain things that I was able to like bend a little bit because it is folklore. It's not like set in stone. So I was able to do that. And it made it a little bit more challenging because you are stuck with something. You can't just make something up because you want to, you know. But it was fascinating to be able to blend real world with folklore that already exists. When I first wrote this, somebody goes, wow, that monster is sick. And I'm like, I didn't make it up. It exists in folklore, so there is a lot of that to work with.
We'll just do one more question and then I'll open it up for all of your questions. So Haley, you have a lot of science in your book, and I think you have a science background, right? So what role does science play in your world building? How do you incorporate that?
Quantum physics.
Actually, though. So in this book, it actually does pull off of a lot of like very, very basic quantum physics principles. So I have a master's in biology. It's not the become a doctor type of biology, though. It's very much like environmental science. And so when I'm writing, generally speaking, I tend to pull more towards like scientific explanations for things rather than like fantastical ones, because for me, I struggle sometimes reading fantasy. I'm like the only fantasy adjacent author who would probably ever say that, because I struggle to suspend my disbelief. And so if I'm rooting something in the real world, especially since this book came from the idea from it came from something real, I want to have an explanation that makes sense in our world. If it's a second world novel, forget it, like I'll do whatever, and it doesn't matter. But like if it's a real world thing, I want there to be at least some sort of scientific basis for why this magical thing is happening. Because if you think about it, like if people could one day fly, the first thing that we would want to do is figure out the scientific reason for why. And I also kind of believe that, generally speaking, a lot of the things that we now think of as science were at one point very magical, and we've just sort of like distilled them down to rules and theories and things like that. So that's something that, when I think about, you know, the reason why I went into environmental science at all was because, like, back in the day, the environmental or the natural world, that's what it's called. Oh, God. The natural world, I can't even think of the real world for it because it's so, anyway, it was this like scary, magical, unpredictable place. And it still is.
Still is.
But because we can name it and because we can wrap science around it, it's more approachable. And so I kind of view that as like a facet of fantasy and writing for me, in the sense that, you know, I want things to feel real, and so I tie them back into real adjacent science.
Great, well, thank you. So what questions do you guys have? Does anyone have any questions? You want to just raise your hand, or?
You were super fantastic in your questions.
I know, you covered it. You got everything.
I guess I have one.
Okay.
So you guys all have awesome covers. How much did you guys get to pick in your covers versus what your publishers kind of, or non-publishers let you decide, I guess?
We were just talking about this.
So again, they Pinterest. They don't just ask for a pitch deck. I just created one. So I had this huge giant deck, and I'm like, here you go. Here's what I'm thinking. I don't know if I even looked at it, but I had the same artist for my first book, Together We Rot, in this one. Again, I've told many people today, if she needs a kidney, I'm here for her. Like, I owe her. I don't even know, like, she just pulls it out of her brain. So I've luckily not been in a position where I have needed to make changes. But, yeah, no, she's just magical, and I owe her my life.
I did my own cover. Yay! And the cool thing with my covers too is that they have a second look into them.
Oh, I didn't know that. Because it's twice removed, I guess.
So that makes me super happy, like how that is. For this cover in particular, because it's set in New Orleans, I wanted to make sure I reflect the art of New Orleans. So when we had gone there, I checked out with local artists how they paint their style, and they use the kind of colors that they also use for their art, and that's what I wanted the front to look for. Which I know it's not the market research that you're supposed to do when you're doing covers for your books. They're supposed to be like, who is your market, what appeals to them, what font do they use. In my other books, I was actually told later on after they're out that maybe I should redo the title because young adults don't know how to read cursive anymore, and they can't read my title. So I never consider that. So there are things that we need to consider after the fact.
So I actually got like a surprising amount of input because I'm traditionally published with a decent sized publisher, and so I had heard horror stories of people who are like told that this is their cover and that's the end of it. So originally they sent me about 4 options. None of them were this. And there were things that I liked about all of them, and there was one that I preferred. And part of the reason why I got different options was because I have a very aggressive agent. Not aggressive, very persistent. Like she's a very good advocate for me, and so I'm not confrontational. Like I was happy to just roll over and be like, yeah, that one's good enough. But she literally like called me and she's like, this needs to be perfect. Tell me what you don't like about it. What do you think of this? Do you think it feels like this kind of book? Like she was really digging in with me. And then she's like, okay. And she took all of my answers to those questions and formulated her own way of saying them nicely to the publisher. And so they kind of gave me another round of options, and then there was another round where we were just tweaking like the text. They kept trying to like superimpose this like very realistic image of the book onto it, because they told me that like books about books and books with pictures of books on the cover sell more or something like that. But it didn't match the rest of the cover, and so I told that to my agent. I was like, it's the only thing I don't like, everything else is great. And she's like, okay. And so she went in and we got this like kind of abstract looking book on the bottom type thing. So it was definitely more than I expected to, and it wouldn't have been as much input as it ended up being if it weren't for my agent just being like very phenomenal at negotiating things like that. So yeah.
Hey, that's great.
Anybody else have any questions?
What are you guys all working on next?
Or not. So I have one book that is already contracted. It is an adult thriller. My publisher's been calling it Cannibal Cruise, but technically it's called Good Taste. It's about a con woman that wants to marry rich. So she is meeting her billionaire in-laws. They own a cruise line. So she's meeting them in Antarctica for the first time. And then she finds out that they want to eat her. And yeah, it is a little awkward. So the tagline is "Eat the rich before they eat you." And then the other one that I'm working on is it's Bridgerton with vampires.
That's all you need to know.
That's it.
What I'm writing next is a story of somebody that used to be able to dream about the future, but now she dreams about somebody else's past.
Okay. I don't have a good because while I have a lot of ideas, I also have a 10-month-old. And so my brain is only just now beginning to unmush, especially like my debut came out almost exactly a month ago on August 26th. So for the past 10 months, I have been either promoting this book or taking care of a baby who doesn't like to sleep. So I have like 4 or 5 ideas circulating, a couple of them that I'm more serious about, but nothing that is like polished enough to talk about, if that makes sense. But he is starting to nap, guys. So like, there should be more soon, I hope. But having a baby just really threw it all out the window. So yeah, sitting there.
You're working on a human being.
Yeah.
Any questions?
How do you guys handle writer's block?
Not well. I'm trying to think if I have a coherent answer. Yeah, no, I don't, not well. My first book, after writing it, I think I tried diving into a new book immediately. I was like, oh, I just finished a book that I've been working on for 4 months. I should do NaNoWriMo like right now. Which is like writing like 1,700 words a day. Like, I should do that right now. That's a good idea. It wasn't a good idea. And it burnt me out. But I think the key, for me at least, is I don't write on weekends. Otherwise, I have a set timeline where, because I'm full-time now, so I'm like, I have a set time from when I'm going to write. It used to be 4 a.m. It's not anymore, but like, yeah, setting times, and then trying to give myself breaks, which I don't enjoy doing, but I need to. So I try to give myself at least 2 weeks just for my brain to just not be what it is.
I work on something creative that has nothing to do with what's causing my block. So if I'm working on a story and I've stopped on something, I'll either write a short story or I'll paint a picture and make the next cover. You do something creative to just kind of loosen the knots, but still continue to write if you want to write. So you can write any other thing, anything silly, or you can even write like a Dear Diary thing, and more often than not, that will loosen things.
I think for me, the best thing to do is to read, but don't read someone else's fiction. You have to read nonfiction, because every book I've ever written has been inspired by something I read in a nonfiction book. That's just kind of how my brain works, and so if I need to take a break from writing because I can't figure it out and I can't like just go for a walk, because that's the first answer, right? You go for a walk, you talk it out, you do whatever. But if it's like, it's the healthiest.
We eat junk food, I don't know.
Yeah. No, so I think that ultimately, like, if I need to like actually take a break because nothing is happening, reading something completely unrelated, sometimes another genre also helps. Like I write speculative historical, so I'll go read like a romance or something like that. Or just something that's doesn't have anything to do with what I'm writing, and weirdly somehow that usually unblocks it, because you'll find something in the other writing that like helps juice the wheels. That's not the word. What's the word? Grease. I would juice them too, but we're gonna juice these wheels.
It's liquid.
All right, well, that's all the time we have, so thank you guys so much.